Watching California Edition, I'm Brad Pomerance in Sacramento, and we are joined by Ben Allen, member of the California State Senate, representing significant portions of the west side of Los Angeles, which, as you know, has significant immunization rates much lower than other areas.
That's right.
And it's troubling to some, but it's gratifying to others. What are you hearing from your constituents on immunization and vaccinations?
Well, we do have some of the lower rates of vaccination in the state, and it's putting people at risk. And so we're trying to put together a bill that would seek to up the vaccination rates in our schools and protect kids. I mean, ultimately, we've got people traveling all over the world. There's all sorts of diseases out there. Every single day on planet Earth, 400 people die of the measles every day, today. And so we've got to take some measures to make sure that more of our population is protected. I think we really forget how much human kind was impacted and forced to suffer through now totally preventable diseases.
Yet, you know, I mean, we know these people. I live right outside your district. I know these people who are just convinced the vaccines cause autism, caused all sorts of developmental delays, and they're not moving off this issue. I mean, I interviewed someone, if I may say, on the issue. It got posted to YouTube. All of a sudden, I started getting tweets attacking me because I just had the conversation about vaccines.
Right.
And so this issue is very heated, and what the bill that you're working on would eliminate most of the exemptions. It would allow it simply if it's going to do harm to the child. And so, you know, you may get picketed, my friend, to say the least.
Well, there's certainly people with some concerns, but I think there are also a lot of folks out there who want to make sure that our schools are safe, that they can, that parents can send their kid to school with confidence, that mothers with babies who are under 1 who can't get the vaccines because they're too young to get the vaccines can go to the market or the store or to the park or to, just to go out into public with their baby.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I have learned just through this discussion that if a community, broadly speaking, has an immunization rate of about 95%, it creates what's known as herd protection.
Right.
And so even if you're unvaccinated, the measles virus, for example, cannot grab hold. There's just not enough. But if you get below 95%, 90%, that's when the virus can get hold to the mother who's pregnant. And yet at some of these West Side schools, 89%, 85%.
Right.
I mean, that's when the mother who's taking their 6-year-old who is vaccinated and holding their 9-month-old, that 9-month-old could catch it, even though their kid is vaccinated because they walk into a school, where it's only 11% of the kids aren't vaccinated.
That's right, yeah.
And so what do we do, sir?
Well, so our proposal seeks to eliminate this personal beliefs exemption that currently exists under the law, and telling folks that they need to get their kids vaccinated.
What are you hearing, though? I mean, that's really what I wonder. Because of your specific district, I think about it, where if there's gonna be,
it's funny, Brad. So yes, there are those who are very concerned about it. On the other side, the flip side of it is because we've got a higher number of some of those folks, we've got everybody else who actually feels that their kids are more at risk because they're living in an area that has those lower vaccination rates. So ultimately, there's a lot of interest on the pro-vaccine side because they think that we're uniquely at risk in our area.
So where do we go from here? At a lot of levels, it's somewhat surprising to think that California has a relatively low vaccination rate. I mean, I learned this, and I cast no aspersion to our friends in Mississippi, but who would have thunk that Mississippi has the highest vaccination rates of MMR in the nation? Mississippi.
Yep, I know.
And we're not up there.
Right.
So, do you think that we can have this move forward?
I think we can get there. I think ultimately, especially with some of the recent news, people realize that there's a risk out there. People are starting to understand that there's a concern and that there actually are real threats, real risks. And I think we've grown complacent. People are starting to realize that, and I do feel confident that we're moving in the right direction on this.
I want to talk about water.
Okay.
The drought continues to plague this state. We've had some rains, which is nice, no complaints there. But recently there was a hearing that really sent shockwaves through a lot of different legislators and communities that dealt with it's re-injection of water that is pulled up during fracking operations. Is that accurate, sir?
That's right.
What can you tell us had been happening, and then what should have been happening?
Yeah, well, So as part of the fracking process, in fact, it's part of oil extraction in general.
Regardless of if it's fracked or not.
Right. You're going into the ground and you're pulling up stuff from the ground,
of course,
right?
Yeah.
And then you're ultimately having to separate out the usable oil
right.
from all the brine and the water, because as you know, there's a lot of water underground.
And presumably some of that water is in decent shape.
Some of it is, some of it isn't.
Okay.
Now the stuff that's really next door, right next to oil fields, are oftentimes dangerous, right? Because there's benzene, there's a lot of chemicals and arsenic, et cetera, that are associated with hydrocarbons and associated with oil in general. So what ends up happening is the state tries to figure out a way to determine what type of water can be sent back. Well, what sort of aquifers can have that wastewater reinjected.
What do you do with that water?
What do you do with that water? And how do you make sure that we're not injecting this waste, this dangerous waste that's actually full of things like benzene, into aquifers that could be used?
Why couldn't you just re-inject it to where it was?
Well, that's effectively what they do, but the question becomes, if that's too close to usable aquifers, we don't necessarily want them to do that.
Right.
But
we've learned through these hearings.
And remember also, the process of extraction loosens it up in a ways that it's no longer going to be exactly the same. It's one thing when it's down there by itself.
Right.
When you're going in there and fracking, of course, you're disrupting the layer you're actually breaking up a layer of rock or diatomides that actually now could potentially, the breaking up of that layer could now impact the ability of that wastewater that you're re-injecting to get into aquifers.
And as I understand it, through this hearing, it was learned that DOGGR, that agency that regulates this issue, the California agency, was not following federal regulations.
That's
apparently.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
They were allowing re-injection into places.
Into non-exempt aquifers, and there are special rules that govern the granting of exemptions, so that that certain aquifers are allowed to have this wastewater re-injected into them. But there's a process that they're supposed to follow to get an exemption to allow for the injection of water into these aquifers.
And DOGGR was just signing off on it.
They were allowing all sorts of re-injection of this wastewater into non-exempt aquifers.
Sir?
Well, that's the question, and that's what really frustrated the legislature. We had a very heated hearing about this.
Right.
And we're asking for accountability out of the administration.
Are you aware as to how word got out this was happening? Because this is one of those things, was it some investigative reporter, or do you know how we got news of this?
That's a good question.
Was it the EPA, federal EPA maybe?
Federal EPA was following it. There were some folks within DOGGR who suddenly started to find the fact that there was a relaxed oversight. There were some reporters from the LA Times and the AP and others who've started to dig into it.
So where do you go from here? Now you have the information. Now you know there's a problem. The federal EPA apparently is all over this, which can't be a good thing. But
it is a good thing.
We don't want to get fined as a state.
I think if this is what it takes to finally get the administration and the industry and the folks at DOGGR to pay attention, I think it's worthwhile. I mean, ultimately, as you know, we've got a water crisis on our hands, and we have to do everything we can to be protecting the few potentially potable sources that are out there. And ultimately, this is about protecting our water.
So now that DOGGR knows it apparently had been working in a way that was against regulation, are they making the necessary changes?
So they say they are. They've committed themselves to a public process. We're concerned about the timeline. They sent a letter to the EPA saying that they're going to be shutting down these wells over a period of time. In one case, these non-exempt aquifers they'll stop reinjection by 2017.
Well, that's a few years off.
That's a few years off. And so one of my questions to the folks at DOGGR was, well, wait a minute, it's out of compliance. It's out of compliance with federal law, and yet we're given an extra 2 years.
Why are we doing that?
Well, they're saying that this is a compliance plan. It's about moving the industry back toward compliance. I think that left a lot of senators really dissatisfied.
Okay, his name is Ben Allen. He is a member of the California State Senate representing significant portions of Los Angeles County. My name is Brad Pomerance. We're in Sacramento, and you're watching California Edition.